What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, it's the Game Week 14 preview, so I'm going to go through a bunch of questions and topics that you put to me on Twitter and give you my opinion. If you do enjoy the video, please do make sure to give it a like, hit that subscribe button if you're new around here. And just before we jump into the first topic and obviously go through the rest, a lot of people ask me about the latest Haaland news because obviously he's been flagged. There's a video circulating on Twitter of him limping, going into apparently an assessment for that foot injury that Pep spoke about. You know, if he is out, who is the next best captain? All those kind of questions came in, but I don't think there's any point in discussing it in this video because we will hear from Pep Guardiola tomorrow in his press conference ahead of that early kickoff on Saturday. So I want to wait and see what he says and then give you my thoughts around that situation and what to do in the final thoughts video tomorrow. So that's where we're going to discuss that. For now, let's jump into the first topic. So this one's about, it's not about World Cup differentials. I probably could have worded that a bit better. It's about differentials before the World Cup. So is now the time to go for a differential punt like Iwobi or Calvert-Lewin with just a few weeks left until the wildcard? So obviously we're going to get those unlimited transfers over the World Cup so we can just completely change our team. I'm not going to specifically talk about Iwobi and Calvert-Lewin because I couldn't believe how often Everton players came up for this video in the questions. So we'll talk about them a little bit later. But in general, you could go for a differential. I think usually we don't have this extra wildcard, so we just plan our team as normal. Who's got good fixtures over the next 4 to 6 weeks, bring them in, and then kind of deal with any issues as they come up. But it is always nice to kind of think about possibly doing something a little bit different ahead of a time when you know you're going to be allowed to completely reset afterwards. So if it does go wrong, it's only gone wrong for like a week or two. So you could start looking at differentials, but bear in mind, we have still got half a season to go after this, more than half a season to go after this, where there's plenty of points to come. So for me, for example, I'm like, what, just outside the top 1 million, and I look at my team and I think, look, it looks okay, it could be better, I could have Saka in there maybe somewhere, you know, different goalkeeper or whatever it is, but I don't think I need to go out of my way to be different, even though I'm just outside the top 1 million. I could get, hopefully, a few green arrows going up until game week 16, and obviously hit the ground running, hopefully, after the World Cup and get a few more green arrows. I prefer to kind of reassess the differentials with like maybe 6 to 10 game weeks to go, depending on what your overall rank is, and then kind of think about just how different you have to go. But if you are someone that wants to do something a little bit different, this is a good time to do it over the next kind of 2 to 3 weeks, because you don't have to necessarily go massively different with a captain. It could just be 1 or 2 players in your 11. And if it does go wrong, as long as you're someone that, you know, is willing to accept that red arrow could happen, if it does go wrong, you got a big reset coming. So it's a good time to look at it, but you don't have to do it right now. Is not the time to go massively differential. There are a lot of game weeks still to come. Alright, so forwards. Who are the best forward options? I'm currently looking to sell Firmino if minutes are uncertain, although I really want him for Leeds. Calvert-Lewin is catching my eye. You see the theme here. Calvert-Lewin kept coming up in the questions. We'll talk about him and his fixtures for Everton in just a minute. Really quickly on Firmino, I'm not sure about his game time versus Leeds. I feel like at some point he is going to need a rest, but I don't know if Klopp can rest him because of all the injuries they've got. Interestingly, last night in the Champions League, Klopp kind of changed formation again. Now, I didn't watch this game, but I heard that Ajax did pretty well for the first kind of 30 minutes. Second half, Liverpool kind of ran away with it. I think Ajax needed to win that game to have a chance of going through to the next stages. So that might be why Liverpool did so well in the second half. But they lined up with more of a diamond, and Klopp talked about this after the game. Obviously, there's a lot of emphasis then to get the fullbacks there to provide width as well from Robertson and Trent. So if they do stick to this formation for Leeds, it could be quite good for Robertson and Trent. Very good for Salah and Nunez playing up front again, but we don't know if they will stick to that. He might go back to that kind of more of a 4-4-2 for Leeds. We just don't know. I suspect Firmino will probably play again, so you don't necessarily have to go out of your way to obviously, you know, transfer him out because Leeds at home is a decent fixture. But if he does play in this kind of role, obviously it's more of a number 10. He's not necessarily playing further forward. He might not be quite as good as an FPL option in this formation if they stick to it, but it is Leeds at home. So I would be tempted to hold him. But if you don't want to hold him, you do want to sell him, well, we're looking around forwards around the same price. These are probably the main options. I'm sure there's someone I've missed here. I'm going to go through the forward list in a minute anyway. I feel like Wilson is kind of the more solid pick. You know what you're going to get from him. He's going to play as long as he's fit. Newcastle are doing really well right now. They're scoring goals. His expected goals personally are pretty decent as well. So I like him as an option. If we look at the fixtures for Newcastle. Villa at home, Southampton away. 2 pretty good fixtures. Chelsea at home is not ideal. We've only got 3 weeks left. I feel like you prioritise the closer fixtures first anyway. So if you get through Villa and Southampton, he's got you a couple of returns. You're probably perfectly okay with playing him against Chelsea. The other player out on the list was Calvert-Lewin. So let's talk about him. I do like Everton's fixtures. I think with Calvert-Lewin leading the line rather than someone like Maupay, you're going to be more dangerous, especially if you want to kind of pump crosses in and stuff like that. I'm still not massively convinced, even though they just beat Palace 3-0. This is a team that's going to go on to score loads of goals, but they do have the fixtures, right? Fulham away, Leicester at home, and Bournemouth away for Everton. It doesn't get much better than that for the last 3 games until the World Cup. And obviously, Calvert-Lewin has had a lot of injury concerns, so he's missed pretty much the whole season, apart from these last 2 games where he's played. And he missed a lot of minutes last year as well. So I'm sure Lampard's going to want to manage him. But apart from a kind of cup game, I think before game week 16, Everton don't have any midweek fixtures. And I wouldn't be surprised if Calvert-Lewin plays the next 3, as long as he can stay fit. And obviously they are bringing him off slightly early. Usually he'd be someone that would play 85 minutes plus. And they could just play Maupay in that cup game and leave Calvert-Lewin for the Premier League games. So if you want to go for a punt, I don't mind Calvert-Lewin, but you do it knowing there is a slight risk, right? This guy has been out for a long time now. He hasn't played multiple 90 minutes in a row, like kind of 5 to 10 games for quite a while. So there is a chance that he misses one of these games, but given the week in between, I think that risk comes down a little bit, right? Had it been a few weeks ago where we had like Tuesday game, Saturday game, Wednesday game, etc., I think there'd be no chance I'd be even looking at him. But for those of you that do want to punt, I kind of like him. We know he's got pedigree. It has been a while since we've seen it just because of the injuries, but we know he's a good forward. I assume he has penalties as well. Richarlison's not there. I don't know who else would take them in that team. If you're an Everton fan, let me know below if I've got that wrong. So yeah, I do like him as a punt. But for 7.9, he's not that cheap. You know, Mitrovic is a lot cheaper. If you've got Solanke, it's a lot of money to find to get to Calvert-Lewin. And there are obviously a lot of other players on this list, right? Gabriel Jesus has got Nottingham Forest at home. We all seem to have forgotten about him. Everyone's looking at Saka. Some people have got an Arsenal defender, Martinelli in there. Jesus is still a really nice option. It would be better if he didn't have that Chelsea away game in game week 15. But for this week, if I was betting on any of these forwards doing the business, he would be the number 1 because of the fixture, right? That is an awesome fixture. Nottingham Forest at home. Jesus looks pretty good. If it's between Jesus and Calvert-Lewin, I mean, Jesus is still only 1 yellow card away from a suspension. I still don't know if I would take that punt. I think I would go for Jesus if I had an Arsenal spot. Bamford is okay, but I feel like he's in a similar position to Calvert-Lewin, where he has had a lot of injury concerns. And Man City, sorry, not Man City, Leeds do obviously have this week Liverpool. And I think they got I can't find Leeds on the list. I think they've got Spurs in game week 16, so it's not really ideal time to bring in Bamford. And the other thing is they're both away games, Liverpool away and Spurs away. It ain't ideal. Liverpool haven't necessarily defended well. I'm sure Leeds can score against them, but I don't see a huge amount of goals in it. Really, if you're going to get Bamford, you want him for a 1-week punt in game week 15. And again, his minutes have even, like, Calvert-Lewin has obviously been eased back in those 2 appearances off the bench. Then he's got over 70 minutes twice. Bamford hasn't made it past 70 minutes apart from the first game of the season. So I think in some ways I'm more worried about his fitness than I maybe am about Calvert-Lewin. I just think with the fixtures and the fitness, you just can't go for Bamford. With Skamaka, I like him, but I'd probably get him after the Man United game. So he's someone where you want to replace a forward, but not until game week 15. So in game weeks 15 and 16, he's got 2 home games against Palace and Leicester. Pretty good. And Ivan Toney, we shouldn't kind of forget about him, right? I haven't talked about him a huge amount recently, but obviously he's still got Nottingham Forest to play. He does have Man City on the last day, and it is an away game, which isn't ideal. But Wolves at home and Forest away, as long as he can avoid that 5th yellow card and then obviously avoid the suspension, he's still a super solid option. 69 points. Like, he's one of the highest scoring forwards so far this year. I've still yet to own him. He's the 3rd highest scoring forward. Obviously, you've got Mitrovic, but I assume most people have him. I think Darwin Núñez is still a really nice option if you can afford him. Scored in the Champions League last night. Did hit the post as well. I know it's a bit of a kind of running meme on Twitter. You know, people were comparing Núñez to Haaland. No one was really doing that. Everyone knows, well, people were doing that, but people that kind of, you know, know what they're kind of talking about, knew that Haaland was the better player, but it doesn't really matter. You don't have to be as good as Haaland to be a good FPL option. And I think he is continually getting chances in that Liverpool team, and at some point he is going to go on a run of scoring lots and lots of goals. He's not going to continue to miss these really easy chances. So I still really like Nunez if you're looking to bring someone in. They've got Leeds at home this week, Southampton at home in game week 16. I think his minutes will be pretty good, but he is going to often get taken off early before the likes of Salah most of the time, I would say. Otherwise, looking at this list, I don't know. I'm sure there's someone I've missed, but I don't think there's a huge amount of other options. We're still waiting to hear about Solanke. Watkins, I just don't really rate that much at all. Vardy's minutes are an issue. Welbeck is just a bit like Watkins. I just can't go there. Daka's minutes are not secure either. Edouard could be an option. He continually starts for Crystal Palace. They got some pretty good fixtures. If you were looking for someone a bit cheaper at 5.4, possibly even a direct Solanke replacement, you could go for him. My main worry is, I don't know how much emphasis to put on these recent minutes, but you know, given like in game week 6 and 5, he missed out, and before that he was playing, he missed out in game week 2 against Liverpool. I mean, he's just one of those players where you could get him in, and he's got 3 good fixtures, and he could get you a goal in each one of those. But if he was benched for any of those games, I wouldn't be completely shocked. But as a punt for Solanke, if he's confirmed out, he could be an option. So I wouldn't completely write him off. Otherwise, I think I've gone for everyone. If there's anyone I've missed out, let me know in the comments below. A lot of people have mentioned if Haaland is out, Alvarez could be an option. Possibly, but if Haaland's only a doubt for 1 game, that's really only a 1-week punt. There's no guarantee that Alvarez plays either. They could play with one of those players that's played as a false 9 before, De Bruyne, Foden, etc. So I just probably wouldn't go there unless you really want to take the punt. And yeah, I think that's it for forwards. A lot of options. Let me know down below who you think's the best. And also let me know, who have I missed out? Alright, is it worth selling Bowen for Saka, or should I keep Bowen and roll the transfer? Now, the second part of that question is obviously difficult for me to answer because that is going to be very team dependent. The question you need to ask yourself is, if you do Bowen to Saka this week and then you've only got 1 free transfer next week, what is that move likely to be? And do you think that's more likely to get you points than rolling and then having 2 free transfers next week? If you have 2 free transfers, what moves are you going to make? So for example, right, if I just bring up my team for this week and then think about possibly for next week. So let's say that Solanke's going to be fit next week and so is Haaland, right? So I don't have to worry about them. This is my team and I'm considering Zaha to Saka, right? So I could do that, and then in game week 15 I could make 1 move, which is possibly Mitrovic to Scamacca, right? I'm not definitely set in on that, but it's something that I am considering. So if I do that, that looks like it probably gains me a couple more points over the next 2 game weeks. The other option is just to keep Zaha, not get Saka in, hope that he outscores him. Obviously, Zaha has a better fixture than Bowen, and then use 2 free transfers in game week 15. But the reality is there's not a huge amount of game-changing moves I can make with 2 free transfers. I don't really, if I don't have to, want to switch Andreas to a dud forward to get a 5th midfielder in, because essentially that's using 2 transfers just to get 1 new player, right? Rather than having 2 new players, if that makes sense. The other options would be to downgrade Trent or Salah to get more money to spread around, but there's not really a huge amount of other players that I want, because if I go for an Arsenal defender, I want them this week when Trent has a pretty good fixture, and then they've both got difficult fixtures in game week 15, so that doesn't help me either. I could obviously go down to someone like Zuma, but then where do I use that money to upgrade? Someone like Mitrovic or Solanke up to Nunez, but then he's playing Spurs in game week 15. So there's always, during like a normal season when we've still got like 5 or 6 weeks to go until Christmas, etc., and we haven't got an extra wild card, maybe you would just roll the transfer to have 2 next week to keep your options open because of injuries and suspensions and stuff like that. And there's always that reason to roll a transfer, but we've only got 3 weeks left until the World Cup. The kind of value of rolling those transfers is becoming less and less, and eventually we've got to use them. So to answer that kind of second part of the question, that really is going to depend on what moves you can make. For my team, and there could be injuries and suspensions that hurt me and I end up having to take a hit, but right now, if Haaland and Solanke are going to be okay, I don't really see a huge amount I can do with the money. If Solanke, for example, is ruled out, I may roll, I may downgrade Trent to Zuma next week and upgrade Solanke to a different forward instead and just hold on to Mitrovic. So a lot will depend on team news. Just on the first part of the question, is it worth selling Bowen for Saka? If you've got nothing else to do with your team, I think that's a pretty good move, right? Bowen's underlying numbers are down on last year. As far as we know from his interview, he's lost penalties as well. And if you look at the the fixtures for the two, right? If we just bring up West Ham really quickly, obviously they've got the more difficult fixture this week, Man United away, but then Arsenal have Chelsea away next week. And outside of that, Arsenal have got Forest at home and Wolves away. So you could say on paper, West Ham's fixtures are slightly better. But I think this season, Saka is a better option than Bowen. As far as we know, he definitely has penalties. And also, Arsenal are a team that are scoring more goals than West Ham. Their attack has just been much better. So in isolation, if you're asking me whether I want Saka or Bowen from now until game week 16, the answer is definitely Saka. So if you've got nothing else to do, and you don't foresee too many issues with only having one free transfer in game week 15, got to remember the right game weeks now, I would probably make this move, I think. I told you that Calvert-Lewin was going to come up a lot in this video, right? And I get it. We're always looking at targeting the best fixtures. That's what Everton have right now. So then you're trying to work out whether there's any players from that team to go for. I was still a little bit shocked about the sheer volume of times that Calvert-Lewin came up in my mentions. But there we go. Let's talk about it. What do you think of Everton players like Calvert-Lewin? Is he a good alternative to Mitrovic and Toney? Now, I've already answered that in the forward section. If you want to take a bit of a punt, and I quite like him, there is obviously a bit of a risk with fitness, but the next three fixtures look pretty good. He is a player that has pedigree. I don't mind it, but obviously he does take up a forward slot when there are quite a few still other decent forwards. But if you're worried about yellow cards for Jesus, Toney, etc., you could go for him, right? I'm not going to talk about him too much more. Is it worth getting someone from Everton for their last three fixtures? So then we're looking about other positions, other players instead. So for me, because of the two away games, I think these are better fixtures to be targeting for an attacker. So then you're looking at the midfielders. The problem for me, right, and I know a lot of people like Iwobi right now, and I'm not writing him off at all. He's got 1 goal, 5 assists. I think from actual returns, he's got the same as Salah, which is, I mean, lots of players have got the same or more returns than Salah this season. That's just the way it's going right now. But obviously only 1 goal. I'd be very surprised if he can keep up this level of assists. The good thing about him is he is going to play 90 minutes pretty much every game. He's done that so far, apart from the Newcastle game. So he is an option. I personally prefer Gordon. He's only got 3 returns so far, but they are 3 goals. And I feel like if they're going to score a few... And this is the problem with Everton. Even though they've just scored 3 against Palace, I'm not convinced they're going to continue to score that level of goals. They just feel like a team right now that's only ever going to get like 1 or 2. I could be wrong. They've got the fixtures to score more, but that's just how I feel about them. But if they're going to nick one, I feel like if you're not going Calvert-Lewin, Gordon's probably the slightly better option. But even then, at 5.4 and 5.5 million, if we go to midfielders, obviously not Trossard, I've clicked on the wrong thing there. Go to 5.8 or below. You've got players like Almiron, for example, in a Newcastle team that are very attacking and played very well so far this season. He could be an option instead. Don't get me wrong, there's not a huge amount of players to choose from at this price point, which is why I wouldn't completely write off Iwobi or Gordon. Obviously, Iwobi's right up there. For 5.8 or less, he's the 4th highest scoring midfielder, and they do have the fixtures. If you want to take a punt, go for it. He's just not really my cup of tea, even with the decent fixtures they've got. And also, and probably more importantly, it's not really just about the price. They take up a midfield spot, right? And if you think about the options we got, Salah, Son, De Bruyne, Rashford, Bowen, Saka, Zaha, Foden, right? Andreas people have got on their bench who's done really well for them as well. That's like 9 players without even really thinking about it. Like if I bring up the whole midfield list, you know, Trossard's there. They've got okay fixtures in the next 2 after Chelsea. Wolves away and Villa at home. James Maddison is still getting points. Obviously, he's got City this week, so you probably wouldn't bring him in. But he could be an option afterwards. The point is, there's lots of midfielders, and I don't know if we're at the stage where we need to fill them with Iwobi or Gordon right now. So for me, I wouldn't go there. Then you're looking at defenders. And if you look at those fixtures, again, you got to play Mitrovic this week as long as he's fit. That's going to be difficult. Leicester are always a team that find a way to score a goal. Then you're just looking at Bournemouth away. There could be 1, maybe 2 clean sheets here, but I find it doubtful because Everton haven't defended that well so far this season. And again, if you bring in a defender to play, you're not playing someone else. So I've got Trent. I appreciate no one wants to get Liverpool defenders right now, but there's still Cancelo and Trippier and Arsenal defenders. Some of you might have Spurs defenders, Chelsea defenders still. The good thing about Everton ones is you know they're going to play. Obviously, the likes of Perisic and Doherty, there's a few doubts around them. Obviously, the same with Chelsea defenders as well. But I just don't think I would be going there even with these fixtures for any of the defenders. Maybe if you were looking for a keeper replacement, you could go for Pickford. He is someone that I would look at. But I just think they've got the fixtures. It's just not a team I want to go out of my way to target right now. So we've looked at Everton, now let's look at Man United. They've got some pretty nice fixtures as well. West Ham at home, Villa away, Fulham away. I'd say their hardest fixture is probably this week, but the fact that it's at Old Trafford is kind of handy. So Man United have good fixtures before and after the World Cup. Obviously, we don't really need to worry massively about what fixtures are coming after the World Cup. Lots of stuff could happen in the month that competition is on. There could be injuries and stuff like that. That could affect how teams are going to perform, how we set up our team. So don't worry massively about that. The only thing I would say is if you're thinking about selling a player that you might then want after the World Cup and you've got money tied up in them, it might be worth holding on to them, but ultimately points is what you want. So just worry about the next 3 weeks. Don't worry too much about the prices unless there's a massive amount of value that you've built up. So who is the best midfielder for Man United that we could get for the next 3 game weeks? So I think people have started to look at Fernandes, and I don't mind him too much, but he's quite expensive. So for most people, it's going to be between Rashford and Antony. And I think Antony is the one that almost guarantees you starts, right? I think he's always going to be on that right side. With Rashford, sometimes he's playing as a number 9, then sometimes he's on the left. And obviously, if he is on the left, that means Martial or someone else is playing as the number 9. So you've also got Sancho competition. But I would be very shocked if Rashford doesn't start all 3 of these games. He may not get to 90 minutes in all of them. He may come off around the 70th, 75th, 80th minute, whatever it is. I think he's going to start all 3 games, and I think he's more of a goal threat, and his underlying numbers so far this season have been better than Antony as well. So if I was going to go for a Man United midfielder, it would be Rashford instead of Antony, and I actually quite like him for the next 3 weeks. I think he's a bit of a kind of shrewd differential. Again, it's exactly the same kind of conversation that I had about Everton. If you put Rashford in, you are not getting another midfielder instead. So you've got to consider that. So for my team, if I did Zaha to Saka, for example, I've got Salah, Saka, Foden, and I can't even remember who the third one is. Who would it be? Oh, yeah, Foden as well. So I'd have... Oh, Martinelli, sorry. So, yeah, Martinelli, Saka, Foden and Salah. I can't even remember my own team. So if I put Rashford in one of those spots, it's difficult to know who to get rid of. I know people will say Salah, right? That's obviously not going to happen. So I could go 5 in midfield if I had the money instead of Andreas. That's an option. But that's the only thing with players like Rashford. It's who do you put them in for instead. But some of you are going to have team setups where you've got like Kane and Haaland instead of Salah. You've got that extra spot. Whatever it is, you might need someone cheaper. I like the look of Rashford. If you're going to go for a defender, I think it's got to be Dalot, but I'm not sure. Again, if you're playing 3 at the back, does Dalot fit in with the likes of Cancelo, Trippier, etc.? Possibly not, but if you're going to go for one, he's probably who I'd look at. If you want to go ultimate differential, you could try Luke Shaw instead of Dalot because he seems to have got his place back in the team now. Like, Ten Hag strikes me as a manager that once you're in until you start making mistakes. And obviously, it wasn't going too well with Malacia, try and get the name right. And so Luke Shaw's coming in. He's played the last 4 games, 90 minutes. And he is a really good player. He is decent going forward. So if you want to do a differential, he's only... I think he's actually the same price. Yeah, Dalot's gone up in price now to 4.7. You could go Luke Shaw instead. But Dalot's decent. Pretty good for bonus. He'd be the one to go for probably if you want a defender. But midfield is probably where it's at. And I think I'd go Rashford. Alright, so what are my thoughts on dropping one forward, assuming you're playing a 3-4-3, which I think a lot of people are right now, and putting the money into midfield for a 3-5-2. So ultimately, I think 3-5-2 looks pretty strong for the next 3 games. It's going to depend on your team setup. If you are someone that has Haaland and Kane as your second premium, not Salah, not Son, not De Bruyne, then you've already got 4 slots in midfield for kind of, you know, value players. Those around the £8 million price point, maybe a little bit lower. I don't think there's any need to go out of your way to put 5 in midfield because you've got Haaland, Kane plus just one of the other forwards. That's probably okay. If you're in a team like mine where Salah is your second premium or maybe one of the other forwards, and like for me, for example, I've got Solanke, Mitrovic, Haaland. Of course, instead of Solanke, I'd rather have Rashford in midfield. The problem I have with that move is we've only got 3 weeks left. And it's going to take me 2 transfers to do that. I don't have 2 free transfers this week. I only have 1. So is it worth a hit to get rid of Andreas Pereira, who's been a really nice bench option for a lot of people, and when they've needed him to play, he has delivered. So get rid of him for a dud forward, so weaken your bench, just to put a 5th midfielder in there? Probably not. Probably not with 3 game weeks to go anyway, and that's my big issue with it. If you've got a team where there's not really anything wrong with it, you just want that 5th midfielder, and you've got 2 free transfers, you could definitely go for it. But with the World Cup coming, there is a chance, right? I'm not going to name players because, to be honest, I don't know who would do this. But if a player has an injury now, like, players are human, okay? So if they've got an injury, it might be like in a normal season where the World Cup's not till the summer, they come back a little bit earlier. But could we see a point where players are like, yeah, I've got that injury, it's not quite right, because they're just hoping that they can be ready for the World Cup instead? And so I guess what I'm trying to say is, we've only got 3 weeks left. There could still be plenty of injuries to come. So having that player like Andreas on your bench, maybe a couple of cheaper defenders, could still be really handy. So I think there's lots of midfielders I like right now. Like, if I can have Salah, Foden, Saka, Martinelli plus one more like Rashford or Bowen or someone like that, I'd really like that, especially with Solanke a doubt in my team. But I don't think with 3 weeks to go there's a rush to do it. And like, I'm not saying players will definitely do that, but we know they're thinking about the World Cup. If you saw how Varane reacted when he got injured in the last game against Chelsea, that to me was a player that was really worried about whether or not he would play in the World Cup. The way he kind of reacted, you kind of assume the World Cup dream was kind of over. That apparently is not the case, but players are concerned about that right now. So these injuries, for those that are going to go and play and be in the squads, that are maybe, would only keep them out for 1 or 2 games, who knows? Now it might keep them out for 3 games. So I think that is something to think about. I think having a good squad can still be handy for the next 3 weeks. So 3-5-2 is good. I just don't think there's a rush to move to it. Let me know if you think I'm wrong in the comments below about any of this stuff. Give it a like if you enjoyed it. Hit that subscribe button if you're new, and I'll catch you again tomorrow.